When Lucas asked me to marry him, I had just been reborn from 5 years in the future. Fast forward 5 years, and my family's fallen apart, while he had his true love by his side and was living a victorious life. I was kneeling on the ground with a big belly, shining his shoes for him. On my shoulder was a scar that he'd burned countless times, stubbornly refusing to heal properly. He crushed the cigarette burning on my shoulder with his toe and said, "Lily, you deserve all of this." Luckily, I had been reborn. Everything was still in time. When Lucas proposed to me, it coincided with the reversal of time and space. I traveled back from 5 years ahead. 5 years later, my family was destroyed. He had his real love by his side, and his life was brimming with success. To keep my younger brother alive, I knelt before Lucas with a swollen belly, mechanically polishing his shoes. Lucas would never be content with my humble and miserable state. He took a deep drag of his cigarette, raised his hand, and pressed the burning cigarette hard onto my shoulder. Then he lifted his foot and slowly stomped it out with his toe. I felt like a dog, pinned to the ground under his foot. I was shaking all over with pain. I didn't dare to dodge or cry out. I feared that if I angered him, he'd stop my younger brother's medication. Stopping the medication meant death. I couldn't let anything happen to my younger brother. Lucas had always had a thing for my shoulders. Before, he liked to kiss them, saying they were like warm jade. He could never get enough of kissing them. Now, he used them as ashtrays. Lucas was a heavy smoker and used them many times a day. The frequent burns left a patch of red and white pus and blood on my shoulders. The scars just wouldn't form. Those who were laughing and jeering around us were our former friends. "Lucas, lighten up a bit with your foot. Don't hurt Lily," a naive and charming female voice rang out. It was Mia's voice. Mia was the daughter of Lucas's family's nanny and had grown up with us since childhood. However, Lucas had never liked her. He said Mia had shifty eyes, vulgar behavior, and wasn't upright at all. He feared I'd be led astray by her, so he never allowed me to get close to Mia. But ever since the scandal about our parents broke out at our engagement party, Lucas had completely changed. He immediately broke things off with me and started flirting and getting affectionate with Mia. They were always seen together. Every time Lucas tormented me, as long as Mia spoke up, I would surely be tortured even more brutally and miserably by Lucas. Mia pointed at Lucas's chest, with her eyebrows lowered meekly, and said in an aggrieved tone, "She kneels like this every day." People were saying behind her back that she was like a dog. "Lily is your childhood sweetheart after all, Lucas. Doesn't your heart ache at all?" Sure enough, the foot he had just moved away stepped down again because of Mia's interruption. Lucas seemed to have heard the funniest joke and sneered, "Heartache? A dog that lives by depending on my mercy? Does it deserve that?" I had to continue lying face down on the ground, humiliated. "Mia, are you jealous?" The flirting voices, gasping softly, came from above my head. Lucas's foot kept slowly pressing on my shoulder, and the pain was searing into my bones. The cold sweat on my forehead dripped onto the ground, forming a small puddle. Being treated like a dog didn't make me angry. I didn't even feel a ripple in my heart. A car accident 5 years ago killed both my parents, leaving only my younger brother as my relative. Overnight, I was not only penniless but also heavily in debt. My younger brother had been in a coma since the car accident and needed expensive medications every day to stay alive. In the past 5 years, Lucas had been constantly humiliating me. I had long been used to it and had become numb. As long as he didn't stop my younger brother's medication, I could endure anything. After a long while, the sound of their kissing stopped. Lucas's foot moved away. My shoulder was already so numb from the pain that my arm had lost all sensation. Suddenly, Lucas said, "Since you're acting like a dog, you should have the awareness of being a dog." He raised his hand and beckoned a man over. "Ethan, come here." Ethan was a perverted and lustful second-generation heir, and countless girls had fallen victim to him. Before, because he touched my hand, Lucas had beaten his hands with a stick until they were broken. Now, Lucas blew cigarette smoke in my face and said to me with a smile, "A dog should know how to lick people." He pointed his finger at a position 3 inches below Ethan's navel. There was a hint of excitement in his tone. "Now, go and lick it." Hearing this, Ethan quickly unbuckled his belt with a pop sound and said eagerly, "Brother Lucas, my dear brother, you're the best to me, so I won't be polite. Lucas nodded at Ethan, clearly very satisfied with his reaction. Mia let out a sigh and said, Lucas, Lily is the eldest daughter of the Thompson family after all. How can you make her do such a thing? Lucas narrowed his eyes and smiled like a naughty child looking forward to a wonderful performance. The eldest daughter of the Thompson family? Huh, isn't this exactly what the eldest daughter of the Thompson family should do? My face turned pale, and I stared blankly at Lucas. Scenes of my younger brother's medication being stopped kept flashing through my mind. At that time, right after the Thompson family went bankrupt, Lucas asked me to drink with a fat and bald old man that I was proud of and slapped Lucas in the face. He wasn't angry or annoyed. Instead, he immediately told the hospital to stop my younger brother's medication. That day, the hospital issued 3 critical illness notices. No matter how much I begged him, he wouldn't relent. He said, Lily, this is the consequence of defying me. I'm not forcing you, as long as you can bear this consequence. My younger brother was my last relative. Because of my defiance, he almost died that day. I was scared. After that, no matter how Lucas tormented me, I just endured it and didn't dare to resist anymore. I couldn't bear the consequence of the medication being stopped. I was truly terrified. At this moment, Lucas's eyes were filled with the glimmer of expectation. He was serious. My heart, which had long been numb, sank deeper and deeper. I lowered my eyes to hide all the useless struggles. Then I got up. I didn't know that it was precisely when time and space were reversing at that time. The face of Lucas, who hated me the most 5 years later, and the face of Lucas, who loved me the most 5 years ago, were constantly changing and overlapping. The scene also changed from the dim private room to the open-air proposal site. The same group of people was still standing around. There was still that familiar jeering sound. I didn't care about anything else and just numbly walked up to Ethan. I squatted down, trembling, and stretched out my hand to pull at his belt. Suddenly, the noisy proposal site became as quiet as a cemetery. With a popped sound, I unbuckled Ethan's belt. The clear clicking sound of the buckle was like a spell breaking through the ice. It seemed to pull everything back to reality from a dream. The silence was broken, and whispers arose. I was pulled into a warm embrace. I froze all over. Lily, what's wrong with you? The next moment, Lucas's voice rang in my ear. Not all embraces are warm and reliable. Some people's embraces, which seem as warm as the sun, are actually tickets to hell. For example, Lucas's. I was shaking like a leaf. I screamed and pushed him away to end the chaos. I crawled on all fours to a corner. I buried my head in my arms, trying to shrink myself into the gap. I was afraid of all his smiles and gentleness. Behind every bit of kindness he showed me, there was a purgatory waiting for me. Lucas's sudden embrace reminded me of the scene when he first threw me into hell himself. That day, Lucas, who had tormented me for nearly 4 years, got drunk. He ran into my room and hugged me, crying. At that time, all the pride that belonged to the daughter of the Thompson family had long been shattered by his various means of humiliation and rotted away in the mire. He seemed to have gone back to the time when he loved me the most and wept in my ear about the unfairness of fate and the unpredictability of worldly affairs. I also cried. I cried and begged him to let me go, but he was no longer the young Lucas after all. He tore my clothes to pieces, regardless of my wishes. Every time I cried, he became more forceful. I thought that day was already a nightmare when I had hit rock bottom. Daylight would always come. But when he woke up from his drunken stupor the next day, his eyes were terrifyingly gloomy. He sneered and threw me into a room full of men. It was clearly he who forced me. However, he pushed all the blame onto me. He cursed me for being shameless and accused me of seducing him when he was drunk. He said that I made him betray Mia and become a heartless man. Lucas said, Lily, you deserve all of this. If you kill someone, you can pay with your life. If you owe money, you can pay it back with money. But what had I done wrong? I had neither killed anyone nor done anything evil. Why did I deserve this? I held onto the door with all my might, begging him not to leave me behind. Lucas was always smiling. He pried my fingers that were holding onto the door open one by one. Then he waved at me casually while slowly closing the door. Goodbye, Lily. Have a nice dream. It turned out that for some people, their sky had already fallen, and there would never be any light. It turned out that the end of a nightmare was not waking up but holding out. I didn't know how I got through that day. It was just that after that, I became pregnant with a child whose father was unknown. When Lucas found out, he was overjoyed. He was so cheerful that those who didn't know would have thought the child was his. He said, "Lily, if anything happens to this bastard child, I'll make sure your younger brother doesn't live to see the dawn." The memories that tore at my soul were like a sudden tsunami, overwhelming me. I trembled and hugged myself, hiding in a dark corner to seek cold tranquility. Lucas tried to approach me. I dodged him frantically, constantly telling myself in my mind to stay away from him, even further away. He was a devil. He thought I was dirty, and he would make me even dirtier. I had a dream, a very beautiful dream. In the dream, Mom and Dad were still alive. My younger brother Jasper was also a lively and energetic teenager. In the dream, I seemed to be sick and lying in a hospital bed. Mom and Dad were waiting beside me anxiously. Seeing that I woke up, Mom grabbed my hand and carefully looked me over from side to side. "Lily, you're finally awake. Are you feeling uncomfortable anywhere?" Dad snorted at my brother. "Jasper, what are you standing there like a fool for? Go and call the doctor to examine your sister." "Sure, Dad. I'll go right away." Jasper readily agreed and then turned to me and said, "Sister, I'll go call the doctor and be right back." After saying that, he quickly ran out of the ward. In our family, favoring daughters over sons was the norm, and the whole family spoiling me was an everyday occurrence. The doctor came to examine me soon and said that there was nothing wrong with my body. It was just that my emotions fluctuated a lot, and I just needed more rest. "Lily, was it because Lucas's proposal to you was too sudden and scared you? He's really something. Usually he looks quite steady and reliable. How could he stage a surprise at such a crucial moment? He didn't even know to give a little heads up in advance. He really made a mess of things." My parents and Lucas's parents were close friends. He and I grew up together as childhood sweethearts. We grew up without any suspicion between us and fell in love during our youthful and innocent years for 10 years. Except for my dad, the parents of both families were happy to see us become a couple. In Mom's opinion, Lucas had grown up under her watch. He was definitely a fine young man with excellent character. She was at ease handing me over to Lucas. However, in Dad's view, there wasn't a single man in the world worthy of his precious daughter. Hearing Mom's words that were partial to Lucas, Dad frowned tightly, glared with his tiger-like eyes, and scolded, "Where is he steady and reliable? He's made our little Lily so upset that she's ended up in the hospital. How can he be considered steady and reliable?" Mom hit Dad on the back twice. "Damn old man, who are you yelling at?" Although Dad looked quite intimidating on the outside, he was actually a henpecked husband through and through. After being hit by Mom, Dad's temper disappeared instantly. Although he backed down, he still muttered stubbornly, "Anyway, I just don't like that Lucas kid." Mom was so angry that she reached out to hit him again. My brother rushed over to protect Dad's back and stuck his neck out, shouting, "Miss Xiao, you can say what you want, but you can't hit people. Stinky kid, get out of the way." "I won't. On my sister's matter, Dad and I will always be on the same side. Brother Lucas may be good in many ways, but he's not as good as my sister. If he makes my sister unhappy, it's his fault. If you beat Dad because of this, I'll take the beating with Dad. Just consider it as me, as a son, helping my old father out." My brother said a lot of righteously indignant words and finally concluded with force, "Anyway, my sister is the best in the world." Dad nodded, very approvingly. "Good son, you're right. What wonderful family members. What a beautiful dream." Tears that had long dried up somehow welled up in my eyes. I bit my lip and tried to open my eyes as wide as possible. Even though the tears had already blurred the warm scene, I still forced myself to stay still, not daring to move. I was afraid. I was afraid that with just a blink, the tears would fall and the dream would shatter, and I would have to go back to hell again. But when the tears would fall and the dream would shatter, and I would have to go back to hell again. But when the tears filled up, they would eventually overflow. I hugged myself and shrank back like an ostrich again. After all, what's false will always be false. When the tears fell, the dream should break. I waited for the arrival of the dark reality, but then I was pulled into an embrace with a faint fragrance by a pair of gentle hands. Lily, why are you crying again? Mom's voice rang in my ear. The breath she exhaled when she spoke even blew on my neck. I, I, I forgot to cry and numbly reached out to hug back. Then I hugged Mom's warm body. A broad and thick hand was placed on top of my head. The voices of Dad and my brother, full of distress, rang out one after another. My little Lily, you must have been wronged. Ah, my sister must have been terribly wronged. I hid in Mom's arms and cried my heart out. My eyes were so swollen that they bulged, and I still hadn't finished crying. No matter how great the humiliation I had suffered before, I had never cried so grievously. Mom stroked my back and choked back sobs to comfort me, just like when I was a child. Baby, don't cry anymore. Your crying is breaking Mom's heart. With Mom here, no one dares to bully our baby. Don't be afraid. Mom will always be with our baby and protect you. Dad and my brother turned around. They stood there for a long time, only raising their hands to wipe away their tears from time to time. I had a peaceful sleep without nightmares in my mother's arms until I was woken up by a faint quarrel. When I opened my eyes, I saw my mother's face. There was tiredness on her face, and her brows were furrowed. Even when asleep, her hand would unconsciously pat my back. At this moment, nestled in my mother's arms and listening to her reassuring heartbeat, I finally believed it. It turned out that the beautiful dream just now was real, and that hellish nightmare, I had finally woken up from it. The style of the mobile phone and the date shown on it all reminded me. It was 5 years ago now. This time, Node was 1 month away from the engagement party that had changed everyone's fate. 1 month was enough to avoid everything. I stretched out my finger and carefully smoothed out my mother's wrinkles. She hadn't suffered much in her life. She was spoiled by my grandparents when she was young and by my father after marriage. In my memory, before my engagement party with Lucas, Mom had always been smiling and carefree. There shouldn't be wrinkles on Mom's face. However, my touch woke her up. My mother exclaimed, "Lily?" I hugged my mother. "Mom, I'm here." My mother let out a long sigh of relief. "You scared Mom to death. I seem to have had a bad dream just now." My mother frowned and thought for a while, but it seemed she couldn't remember what the dream was. She shook her head and said, "Forget it. Don't think about it. Dreams are always the opposite. Bad ones won't come true while good ones will." My mother's shout just now had startled the people outside the door after all. The door of the ward opened, and my brother rushed in. "Mom, what's wrong? Sister, you're awake? Are you still feeling uncomfortable anywhere?" My father, who came in later, stepped forward and asked, "Did we disturb you?" Mom shook her head and said no. I also shook my head. Suddenly, a person emerged from behind my father. "Lily, I'm sorry. I didn't expect that my proposal would scare you. I just wanted to give you a surprise. Will you forgive me?" I said no. "Lily, I'm sorry. I didn't expect that my proposal would scare you. I just wanted to give you a surprise. Will you forgive me?" I said no. "Lily, I'm sorry. I didn't expect that my proposal would scare you. I just wanted to give you a surprise. Will you forgive me?" I said no. "Lily, I'm sorry. I didn't expect that my proposal would scare you. I just wanted to give you a surprise. Will you forgive me?" It was Lucas. The beautiful world that I had just managed to accept was instantly shattered by Lucas's appearance. My body couldn't help but start shaking. My mother was the first to notice my abnormality and asked me what was wrong. I was trembling all over, and my eyes were darting around. Thermos cups, bags, mobile phones, notebooks, all the things that I could reach. I grabbed them all and threw them at Lucas. "Get out, get 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 out," like this. His car collided with my parents'. My parents' car rolled down the cliff, and they died on the spot. My brother was in a coma. Lucas had a cut on his forehead, and his face was covered with blood. It seemed he was seriously injured, but it was all an illusion. Lucas's car belonged to the company and was driven by the driver. When giving the testimony, the driver said he had just gotten his driver's license and happened to encounter a slippery road after the rain, and the brakes also failed. In a panic, he crashed into my parents' car. In the end, the car accident was ruled as an accident, and Lucas, after wiping the blood off his face, was still the young and dashing general manager Lucas. I hadn't thought about dying with him. After my parents died, the Thompson family went bankrupt. The high debts weighed me down so much that I could hardly breathe. Jasper also showed no signs of waking up. I couldn't see any hope at all. I carried a bag with a knife in it and waited outside Lucas's family's house. I wanted to take advantage of the moment when he opened the door to go home and stab him to death when he was unprepared. The hospital called. They said my brother's fingers had moved and he might wake up soon. At that time, I was still glad that I hadn't taken action. If something had happened to me, what would my brother do when he woke up? But when I rushed to the hospital, my brother showed no signs of waking up again. The doctor said he needed the company of relatives and to be stimulated by talking. Whenever I had time, I would stay by his side and keep talking. I talked about our childhood, about his dream of becoming an overbearing CEO and letting me always be the princess in the Beijing circle. But at night, I had to leave with Lucas. I needed money to keep my brother alive. At that time, all I thought was that as long as my brother could wake up, I could avenge my parents. All my humiliation would be nothing. All my hopes were consumed between my brother's coma and possible awakening. Until Lucas threw me into that dirty room. The faint light that was burning with difficulty in my heart went out. Where was the hope? How ridiculous! Jasper had been in a coma for 4 years. If he could wake up, he would have woken up long ago. My brother wouldn't wake up. I cut my wrist several times hard. I thought I could finally be free, but Lucas, that devil, found doctors to save me and also invited top experts to treat Jasper. Jasper got better at a visible speed. Only then did I know that my brother Jasper hadn't been seriously injured in the first place. His coma was all planned by Lucas. Lucas used Jasper to control me. He was like someone who used an apple to tease a donkey. After dying once, I completely bent my back and obediently became a donkey at his mercy. I was already covered with maggots. I'll die when Jasper wakes up. My sudden loss of control surprised everyone. Mom hugged me to comfort me. My brother went to call the doctor. My father drove Lucas out. Lucas didn't want to leave and begged my father to let him in. Uncle Thomas, let me go in and see Lily. I'm worried about her. Suddenly, another deep voice rang out from outside the door. Lucas, let Lily have a good rest. Let's go back first and come back in a few days. Through the door, I couldn't see the person's face, but that voice had long been engraved in my mind. Alexander! I screamed and ran to the door. I pushed Lucas away. A handsome and charming man appeared in front of me. With smiling eyes like peach blossoms, a high nose, thin lips, and a small dimple hidden at the right corner of his mouth. He was exactly the same as in my memory. I plunged into his arms with a cry. I put my hands around his waist and refused to let go. The scene was in chaos. I put my hands around his waist and refused to let go. During the 5 years when I was toyed with and controlled by Lucas, I had also caught a glimpse of the light of day. The name of that light was Alexander. Alexander was Lucas's cousin, and he was 4 years older than me. Alexander had been good-looking since he was a child, with long legs, tall stature, and fair skin. I loved following behind him and being his little follower. When I was 8 years old, Alexander's parents were murdered by killers hired by his competitors. After the grandfather of the Lucas family lost his eldest son, he focused all his energy on cultivating his second son, that is, Lucas's father. Alexander's branch of the family was regarded as an outcast and was later taken to live with his maternal grandparents. He withdrew from my life, and we lost contact since then. As time passed, I gradually forgot about him. In my memory of my previous life, Alexander had settled abroad after studying abroad. He didn't come back when Lucas proposed to me. This time, why did Alexander show up in advance? In my previous life, he clearly returned to China when I had just been controlled by Lucas. At that time, Alexander had already contacted hospitals abroad and was ready to take my brother and me away. The accident caused by brake failure happened again. This time, it was Alexander's life that was targeted. In my previous life, Alexander was like a firework. It bloomed magnificently, yet fell instantly at its most passionate moment, leaving only a long, black night behind. That was the first time Lucas shattered my hopes. Lucas stroked my face, his eyes as cold as a venomous snake's, tracing my eyebrows and eyes inch by inch. However, the tone of his speech was full of tender affection and reluctance. He said, "Lily, you'll have to rot by my side for the rest of your life. You can't escape." I don't know why Alexander is here in this life. Moreover, he didn't seem to dislike my abrupt hug. Alexander let me smear his clothes all over with my snot and tears. After a long while, Alexander sighed softly. "Lily?" Hearing her name pronounced with the familiar diminutive suffix, she looked up at him. Meeting Alexander's gaze, she crashed into the deep affection in his eyes. Alexander naturally patted my back and said, "It's all in the past." His ambiguous words stirred up a tempest in my heart. "Alexander, you. Alexander understood my question and nodded knowingly. With his slightly cool fingertips, he wiped away my tears. So Alexander has also come back. Lucas was driven out by my father. I asked my mother and brother to go home and rest first. Only Alexander and I were left in the ward. In my previous life, Alexander showed up when I needed him most. He confessed his love to me, saying that he had always liked me. At that time, I grasped him tightly like a life-saving straw. I didn't really face his love carefully. In the quiet room at this moment, we could hear each other's breathing. The atmosphere was somewhat hazily ambiguous. I broke the awkwardness. "When did you remember? 3 days ago?" Alexander's eyes were deep. After I remembered everything, I rushed back to the country. Due to various reasons for the delay, I only arrived yesterday. Suddenly, he raised his hand and tucked a strand of my fallen hair behind my ear. "Lily, fortunately, you didn't accept Lucas's proposal. Otherwise, I really wouldn't know what to do." Alexander then asked me what had happened after his death. I lowered my eyes and remained silent. Seeing that I wasn't in the right state, Alexander said helplessly, "Forget that I asked. The most important thing is now. We can still make amends." I calmed my mind and ignored those dirty things for the moment. Yes, we can still make amends. In my previous life, the engagement ceremony was held in the second month after Lucas successfully proposed to me. That day was also the 25th wedding anniversary of Lucas's parents. Combining these two important events, the grandeur was evident. At that unprecedentedly grand banquet, a shocking scandal broke out. The images of my father and Lucas's mother having an affair were broadcast everywhere through the live streaming platform by the guests attending the ceremony on the big screen. The banquet was in chaos. By the time the scene was brought under control, the video of the two had already gone viral on the internet. It was impossible to do any public relations damage control. When the two were found, they were still madly entangled while not in their right minds. Lucas's father was so stimulated that he had a heart attack on the spot. By the time he was sent to the hospital, it was too late to save him. My mother fainted. When Lucas's mother regained consciousness and learned that Lucas's father had died because of this incident, she went completely mad, although we knew that the two of them couldn't possibly have done such a thing. They must have been framed. However, under the pressure of public opinion, it was impossible to explain it all. Moreover, the results of the police investigation didn't show any traces of the two being drugged. This result was like the last straw that broke the camel's back. Lucas completely changed. He seemed to have accepted this result as well. I begged him not to believe those false appearances that were covering up the truth. There must be some evidence that hadn't been found yet. Lucas looked at me expressionlessly and said the last kind-hearted sentence to me. He said, "Lily, I can't hold on any longer." I also knew that compared to what the Lucas family had suffered, our family's financial losses, the breakdown of my parents' relationship, and the damage to my father's reputation, these damages were all too light. I guess that at that time, Lucas already regarded my father as the chief culprit when he looked at him. 3 days after that separation, Lucas's mother suddenly went mad and committed suicide. The surveillance video before her death was leaked. In the video, Lucas's mother kept shouting that it was my father who had harmed her. Since then, Lucas and I became strangers. My parents died in a car accident, and my brother was in a coma. Alexander held my shoulders and pulled me back from my memories. Looking into his eyes, Alexander's gaze was firm. "Lily, believe me." For the convenience of communication, Alexander moved into the house next to mine. After he handed over all his work to his assistant, he came to my house every day. During this period, whenever Lucas came to look for me, he was driven away by my father and brother. Before, I had protected Lucas. Although the two of them didn't like Lucas, they had endured it for the sake of not making things difficult for me. After knowing that I was going to completely break off with Lucas, my father and brother didn't even bother to be polite to Lucas. Each time, they just let the dog out to drive him away. Of course, my father and brother also didn't like Alexander. However, Alexander was good at handling people. He said, "I'm not here to break up this family. I'm here to join this family." My brother frowned and was just about to retort. Alexander spoke again. "I'm an orphan with no parents. Apart from owning a company, I'm useless. I want to shamelessly rely on our childhood friendship and use my company as a dowry to become a live-in son-in-law of the Thompson family." 1. I don't know if I'm qualified enough. Alexander's attitude was solemn. "I know I'm not outstanding enough and don't deserve Lily, but I'll try my best to make myself better. They say that men go bad when they have money. Lily, Dad, Jasper, don't worry. I, Alexander, definitely won't. I'm not just talking empty words. I've thought everything through. I'll give all my money to Lily. I just want to have Lily." After the words, "live-in son-in-law," came out, my father and brother became more and more satisfied as they listened. In the end, my father smiled and said, "Well, you're not bad." My brother also said, "You do look a bit like my future brother-in-law." I was completely shocked. Even though I didn't take care of the company's affairs, I had also heard that it was a multinational company that had developed rapidly in recent years. "Actually, you don't have to do this." "Me?" Alexander interrupted me. "Lily, I like you. For a long time." His eyes were sincere, and in his eyes was a firmness that hadn't changed even after crossing life and death. "Even if you can't accept me now, please don't reject me, okay?" After experiencing those 5 years in my previous life, there was already something wrong with my heart. Although I hid it well, actually, I really, really, really hated men. But if I still had the ability to accept the opposite sex, that person must be Alexander. I said, "Okay." In my previous life, from the outbreak of the scandal to Lucas's falling out with me, it took less than a month in total. Things broke out one after another in a very compact and orderly manner. Each time, it would precisely destroy Lucas's sanity. Based on the principle that the one who benefits the most is the most suspicious, all these incidents pointed directly at Mia. After analyzing all the incidents, Alexander came to such a conclusion. I deeply agreed with this result. Indeed, Mia was the most suspicious. She was originally just the daughter of the nanny in the Lucas family, but in the end, she became the person Lucas trusted the most. At first, I was too involved to see clearly. Now, looking at this matter from the perspective of an onlooker, I could find the strange points in it. Recalling the past, I said, after the scandal happened, the Lucas family was supported by Lucas alone. He had to take care of his mother and also handle the company's affairs at the same time. I offered to help him take care of his mother, but he refused, saying that someone was already taking care of her. Later, I went to check because I was worried, and I found that the person taking care of Lucas's mother was Mia. Alexander then said, "At that time, my second uncle had just passed away, and my second aunt was mentally unstable and not in her right mind. If Mia provoked her with words at this time, my second aunt would be easily stimulated and then go mad." I said, "Now that I think about it, it's indeed the case. Back then, every time Lucas and I were about to ease our relationship, Lucas would be called away by a phone call, saying that his mother had an illness." Alexander was puzzled. "Before that, hadn't you noticed Mia?" I shook my head. Lucas didn't like her, and he didn't even allow me to have contact with her. Alexander said, "Judging from the things she did, she should have liked Lucas, but Lucas only had eyes for you." But Alexander didn't say the rest of the words. But we both already knew the reason in our hearts. After that, Alexander asked someone to focus on investigating Mia. Not only was it confirmed that Mia had been secretly in love with Lucas for many years, but also some interesting things were found out. Mia was cautious and didn't leave any handles when doing things. Moreover, she hadn't done anything to harm the Lucas family yet. If I exposed her now, apart from making her more vigilant and on guard, there would be no benefit at all. What's more, her mother had a connection with Lucas's mother. Alexander suggested that I play along with her plan, hold an engagement party with Lucas, as in the previous life, stimulate Mia, and make her take action. I was very resistant to this suggestion. I directly refused. I don't want to. Although Lucas hadn't done anything to harm me at this time, This couldn't cover up the fact that he had tortured me for 5 years. Those pains were real, and I had suffered them. I told Alexander frankly, the maximum extent to which I can control my malice is to treat Lucas as a stranger. Alexander raised his eyebrows. Why do you need to control your malice? People are born with evil in their nature. If you can't restrain your evil, won't you become a person like Lucas in the future? Seeing my surprised expression, Alexander said, I've got your back. You've been wronged, but don't take revenge. This makes me feel useless. I denied it. That's not what I meant. I just don't want to become a monster beyond recognition. Alexander gestured to me with his hand, asking me to listen to him first. You know the old saying left by our ancestors, a gentleman will take revenge if he has a grudge. We, as the younger generation, should listen to advice and be kind-hearted instead of doing evil. So we should be open and above-board gentlemen who will surely take revenge when we have grudges. It seemed quite reasonable. Under Alexander's persuasion, I finally decided not to run away. I pretended to call Lucas and said that I agreed to his proposal. Lucas was so excited when he received my call. He wanted to meet me immediately. I immediately interrupted him and used these insincere words to deal with him. Lucas, you know, your proposal scared me last time. I've always wanted to marry you. I didn't expect that my dream would suddenly come true. I still think I'm dreaming now. Could you let me take it easy, please? The current Lucas loved me dearly and never doubted what I said. When my father, mother, and brother heard that I had accepted Lucas's proposal, they wanted to have a heart-to-heart talk with me directly. Compared with Alexander, a successful person who wanted to marry into our family, Lucas was no longer in their good graces. Now they just couldn't stand the sight of him and had reached the point where they felt disgusted and even hateful at the mere sight of him. Fortunately, Alexander stopped this round of questioning for me. I don't know how he explained it, but since then, my parents and brother never asked me about these things again. In order to make things happen as they did in the previous life, I suggested to Lucas that we hold an engagement ceremony. He might also have noticed that I was different from before recently. He carefully confirmed with me again and again. After getting my affirmative answer, Lucas laughed like a fool on the phone. Then he wanted to make an appointment with me to go and see the dresses, the venue, and so on. In my previous life, during the month when we were preparing these things, Lucas directly handed over the company's affairs to others to manage. The tables, chairs, drinks, small cakes, dishes, flowers, and lights arranged at the banquet were all carefully selected by him one by one, thinking of the tragic ending between him and me in the end. Without thinking twice, I flatly refused. Lucas, you know I haven't been feeling well recently. You know all my preferences. I believe you'll prepare all these things well for me, right? While saying these gentle words, my eyes were icy cold. I'll get everything ready, Lucas said softly again. It's just that, Lily, you haven't called me Lucas for a long time. And I had already hung up the phone. Here, Alexander and I carefully checked the plan together. Then things happened even faster than we expected. Suddenly, a video of Lucas's proposal to me that day went viral on the internet. The title was quite straightforward. At the proposal site, the female lead tried to unbutton someone else's belt. Without even opening it to look at the content, I knew it must be the video of me unbuckling Ethan's belt. The proposal site arranged by Lucas was quite grand, so it was normal for a video to leak out. On the day I was reborn, I had the intention to commit suicide because before that, I accidentally overheard the casual conversation between Lucas and Ethan. In order to torture me, Lucas handed over all the follow-up treatment matters of my brother to Ethan. Ethan had a lewd smile on his face and made a disgusting gesture with his hand. Really, Brother Lucas? Then I can manipulate it as I like. It's hard to imagine that Lucas, who had always looked down on Ethan, would call a scumbag like Ethan a brother 5 years later. It seemed that all my hopes had been extinguished. I numbly knelt on the ground to polish Lucas's shoes and quietly endured his humiliation. I put colorless and odorless poison in the wine and drinks sent to the private room that day. Let's just die together anyway. I have nothing left. It was worth it if I could take these scumbags who didn't want to die with me. So now, looking at that video that was maliciously edited and smeared, I was completely unmoved in my heart. I'm a person who has walked out of hell. What could such an ambiguous video mean to me? Alexander was very angry about this matter, especially after he found out that Mia was the one who uploaded the video at first. I spent a lot of effort to comfort him. Mia's eagerness to slander me just proves that our judgment is correct. She indeed likes Lucas very much. If you want someone to perish, you must first make them crazy. Let her have fun for a while because she won't be able to laugh anymore in the future. For the sake of the overall situation, Alexander could only let Mia go for the time being. When we were discussing the rumor-refuting text together, Lucas called. Surprisingly, he had also found out about Mia. In my previous life, he couldn't find out who was behind it, no matter what he did. But this time, he managed to find it out so easily. He didn't investigate when he should have, yet he was so efficient when he shouldn't. To be honest, he's really a spoil sport. In order to make him let Mia go and not interfere with the development of things, I could only patiently coax him. Mia must have also been provoked by others. She grew up in your family since she was a child. It's quite normal for her to defend you. Don't blame her. She was just bewitched for a while. It won't. I believe she'll never do such a thing again in the future. Our engagement is just 2 weeks away. Let's not create any more complications. Besides, your mother raised her like a daughter. If your mother knew about this, how sad she would be. In the end, Lucas promised not to pursue Mia. He said, "Lily, you're so kind." I just smiled and didn't say anything. Who could say otherwise? I was just too kind. I issued a statement to refute the rumors. Immediately after that, Lucas also refuted the rumors and sent a lawyer's letter to hold the rumor mongers accountable. After this incident, I was worried that Mia would become more vigilant because of it and wouldn't sabotage the engagement party. So, when she was forced by Lucas to apologize to me, I deliberately showed off my affectionate relationship with Lucas to stimulate her. "Mia, I believe you definitely didn't do this. Don't worry, I've already scolded him. It's all Lucas's fault for caring too much about me." Whenever something related to me happened, he got overexcited and lost his rationality. Although he looked so imposing outside, in private, in front of me, he was as pitiful as a little puppy when he was aggrieved. But his being so nervous about me really put a lot of pressure on me and made me so annoyed. I'm so tied up by him in this life. I guess only a feud like killing one's father could separate us. Oh, why am I telling you these things? You can't experience Lucas's preference. You don't understand, and you'll never understand. Mia kept her head down all the time while listening to me. Her thick bangs covered her eyes. I couldn't see her expression. If it weren't for her hand gripping the cup so tightly that it turned white, I would really be afraid that she was too good at holding back. Just show your dirty claws as you did in the previous life. On the day of the engagement, I was waiting in the dressing room for things to happen. In my previous life, that scandal didn't break out until after the engagement ceremony was completed. This time, although it was just an act, in this life, I didn't want to walk down the aisle with Lucas. Alexander found out that Mia's father had purchased some potent, colorless, and odorless drugs a few days ago, and Mia's stepmother and stepbrother, one was helping in the kitchen and the other was a waiter. And her mother was also helping Lucas's mother arrange the venue all along. No wonder we couldn't find any traces in the previous life. It turned out that not only was her whole family involved, but they were also all frontline staff and direct contact with everything. Alexander had been frowning all day long, and he seemed to be in a very bad mood. I asked him what was wrong. He said that he didn't want to see me walking down the aisle with Lucas. I smiled. This guy thought the same as I did. I told Alexander about my plan to stimulate Mia so that she would carry out her plan ahead of schedule. Only then did he relax his brows and immediately told his people to keep a close eye on every move of Mia's family in advance. So when Lucas's mother asked Mia to come and help me, I pretended to be annoyed and pulled Mia aside and said some stimulating words to her. "Lucas loves me so much, Mia. Look at this engagement ceremony. It cost $30 million. I told her that it was just an engagement and not to spend so much money, but she just wouldn't listen. The set of jewelry I'm wearing was also custom made by him specifically to match the dress. It's said to be worth tens of millions. He also had this diamond tiara, custom made for me. It's so heavy on my head. It's just a simple engagement, but he had to spend hundreds of millions. He's such a spendthrift," Lucas said. "He wants to hold hands with the most beautiful me on the aisle. Maybe it's his obsession." Sure enough, after hearing what I said, Mia made an excuse and left the dressing room. I guess that she went to inform her father to carry out the plan ahead of schedule. Don't let me down, please. When my father was waiting with a dark face with me beside the aisle, Alexander secretly gave me an okay gesture. I knew that Mia had taken action, and everything was going well. After the MC warmed up the atmosphere, it was time for me to enter. My father's face really never looked pleasant throughout the whole process. I took my father's arm and walked to the middle of the aisle. My father's arm was clamped tightly, as if he was afraid that I would run away if he loosened his grip for a moment. I looked at Lucas's outstretched hand. I stood still and kept my arm around my father's, not pulling it away at all. At first, there were jeering sounds from the audience. Gradually, everyone noticed that something was wrong. Whispers replaced the jeering sounds. Lucas's eyes were full of pleading when he looked at me. I looked at him expressionlessly until the voices of Mia's family plotting were broadcast from the speakers in every corner. On the 3 walls, the big screens that were supposed to play sweet photos in the previous life broadcast the scandal live. In this life, they broadcast the process of the masterminds behind the scandal plotting their evil deeds. I have to say that the people arranged by Alexander were really meticulous. They not only filmed the whole process of their plotting completely, but also took clear pictures of the faces and expressions of this whole family. Mia asked her father, "Are both kinds of drugs ready?" Mia's father patted his chest and assured her, "Don't worry, they're all ready." I bought drugs that are colorless, odorless, and undetectable. Mia nodded with satisfaction and then gave instructions to Mia's mother and stepbrother respectively. "Mom, before going out on the day of the engagement, you must make sure that General Manager Sebastian and Lucas's mother take the drugs. The drug for General Manager Sebastian is blue, and the one for Lucas's mother is white. It's easy to remember. Brother, when it's time for the engagement, you give them the prepared drinks respectively. Don't make any mistakes. Only those drinks are the triggers." Mia's stepmother asked, "Will it be found out?" Mia was confident. "What are you afraid of?" By then, the scene of Lucas's mother and General Manager Lionel having an affair will be broadcast live. General Manager Sebastian will be so stimulated that he has a heart attack again. When all these things break out at the same time, Lucas won't have time to investigate these things by himself. Mia's father also said, "Yes, that time will be enough for us to destroy all the evidence." Mia nodded approvingly. "Besides, my mother and I are monitoring the Lucas family all the time. Nothing will go wrong at all." The stepbrother flattered her. "Mom, you're just worrying too much. My sister will be the young mistress of the Lucas family in the future. How could she not handle such a small matter properly? Sister, I'll rely on you completely in the future." In the video, where was there any sign of the timid and cowardly Mia that she usually showed? She was completely a vicious and ruthless villain. The guests at the scene were all stunned. No one expected that they could watch such a big drama just by coming to an engagement ceremony. Mia, who had been looking forward to seeing me make a fool of myself, suddenly went mad and ran to the screen, shouting and asking people to turn off the screen. But she forgot that she'd specifically asked others to prepare these screens. They wouldn't be easily powered off at all. The engagement ceremony was interrupted. Everyone no longer cared about why I ignored Lucas on the stage. I found an empty seat and sat down, quietly watching the drama unfold. Lucas's mother was the one who was hit the hardest. In the past, after Mia's mother gave birth, Mia's father not only cheated on her, but also beat and cursed her at will. After Mia's mother gave birth to Mia, Mia's father even borrowed a large amount of usury. Mia's father told Mia's mother that either she sold Mia to pay off the usury, or they got divorced and she took on the debt herself. When Mia's mother was at her wit's end and was about to jump into the river with the newborn Mia in her arms, it was Lucas's mother who happened to pass by and save the mother and daughter. Lucas's mother not only took them in, but also treated Mia as her own daughter. When Mia's family was escorted onto the stage, they were still wearing the clothes of waiters. Lucas's mother grabbed Mia's mother by the collar and asked, with her eyes wide open in anger, "Yvonne, I've been so kind-hearted to both of you, mother and daughter. Is this how you two ungrateful wretches treat me? You're not only trying to ruin me, but also make my family fall apart?" Mia's mother pushed Lucas's mother away and pointed at her, shouting abuse. "Your family falling apart serves you right. We're in the situation because of you, you bitch. What was wrong with having a little conflict with her father just after I gave birth? If it weren't for you, would I have divorced? Would Mia have grown up in a single parent family? And would I still have to work as the lowly nanny in your family? So, if you really wanted to be nice to us, why did you deduct money from my salary after paying off that usury? Aren't you just trying to create the illusion of being a great benefactor? You've never regarded us as human beings from the beginning to the end. You've always looked down on us. Mia and Lucas grew up together as childhood sweethearts, and they were a perfect match. In order to break them up, you made Mia live on campus all year round, and you still claim to have been so kind-hearted to our mother and daughter, and you call us ungrateful wretches. I spit on you. You're such a hypocritical villain. Lucas's mother was stunned and stood there, murmuring in explanation, I was afraid that your money would be cheated away by Mia's father. I've been saving it for you all along. I've always regarded Mia as my daughter. Lucas doesn't like her at all. If she hadn't tried to seduce Lucas, why would I have sent her to live on campus? Mia's mother interrupted Lucas's mother's words and said hatefully, Shut up. My Mia is beautiful and kind-hearted. Why shouldn't Lucas like her? Isn't it because you bitch, despise us for our poor conditions and think we're not good enough for your family? If you hadn't meddled and broken up their children, they would be running around by now. All of Mia's family stared at Lucas's mother with a sinister look. Obviously, the whole family had the same idea. Lucas's mother had been so nice to Mia's mother and Mia on a daily basis that they had developed improper thoughts. Especially Mia. She had lived in the wealthy environment of the Lucas family since she was a child. She had long thought that all these things should belong to her. Since Lucas's mother treated her as a daughter, she also regarded herself as the pampered daughter of the Lucas family who could do whatever she wanted. After falling in love with Lucas but being sent away by Lucas's mother, who had always indulged her, she held a grudge against Lucas's mother. She thought that the existence of Lucas's mother and Lucas's father had blocked her way. So she wanted to clear the obstacles. Lucas's mother, Lucas's father, me, and the Thompson family behind me were all the obstacles she wanted to remove. The police arrived at the scene. All the evidence of Mia's family's crime, such as the drug purchase records, the drugs found in the hiding places, and the videos, was conclusive. The whole family was neatly handcuffed and taken away. When Mia passed by me, I don't know where she took out a knife from. Taking advantage of everyone's unpreparedness, she quickly stabbed at me. When the shiny knife was about to stab me, a figure flashed by and pushed me away. The sound of the knife cutting flesh rang out behind me. I quickly turned around. It was Lucas. I don't know if it was because of the push. Mia's knife staggered and stabbed Lucas 3 inches below his navel. Lucas covered that place with both hands. He had already fainted from the pain. I saw Lucas again a week later. I heard that during this week, the Lucas family had invited many surgeons. Although he recovered, the result didn't seem to be ideal. The reason I went to see him was to make a clean break with the past. Having not seen him for a few days, Lucas had long lost his former charm. Now he was pale, listless, and haggard. His eyes were red from crying, and he asked me, Are our 10 years together not as good as the few months between you and him? Here, him referred to Alexander, who accompanied me. Why? We clearly loved each other. When I proposed to you, the look of surprise and joy in your eyes when you saw me wasn't fake. But why did you become so strange in the next second? You avoided me and didn't want to see me. There was no love in your eyes when you looked at me anymore, only icy and strange hatred. Why? Why? I calmly watched him go, from being hysterical to persistently asking for an answer. I clearly knew that the Lucas now and the Lucas 5 years later were two different people. I couldn't tell the current Lucas about what the future Lucas had done. Similarly, I couldn't transfer the anger for what the future him had done onto the current him. After a long silence, finally, I could only say, actually, there were 15 years. Those 5 years are probably something the current you don't want to see. I couldn't view them as one person, nor could I calculate them separately. After all, they were the same Lucas. After saying these words, regardless of whether he understood or not, I turned around and left. A complete break might be the best outcome. Recently, Alexander had been sulking. I pestered him for a long time before he told me the reason. It turned out that he thought it was too easy for Lucas to just break up with me. He thought Lucas hadn't received enough revenge. I asked him to take revenge on Lucas to comfort the broken-hearted Lily who was hurt by him. I agreed with doing this. But if the price of revenge is that I'll become more and more unable to let go and keep thinking about taking revenge again and again, even if the rest of my life is occupied by the thought of how to take revenge on Lucas, can you accept this result? At first, I didn't want to let Lucas off either, but when I found that if I kept obsessing over this matter, I would ignore the people who truly loved me, having a second chance was a hard one. Was it worth wasting time on that scumbag? After hearing this, Alexander became even angrier. All right. Anyway, he's disabled now and can't be tough anymore. It's considered that he got his comeuppance. Finally, I managed to coax Alexander. He promised me on the surface that he wouldn't think about these things anymore. But who knew that a month later, Lucas suddenly showed up at my door. The clothes that used to fit him well now made him look wobbly when he wore them. His hair was casually scattered, his eyes were full of paranoia. The last time I saw him, he was still sickly. Now he looked sinister in his sickly state. Lily. When the two words were pronounced from his mouth, it was as if they were coated with frosting named yearning. It was like he had chased after his beloved across life and death. Hearing his voice, my mind went blank with a bang. I froze on the spot, trembling as I looked at him. Lucas? The one in front of me was the Lucas from 5 years later. The reason why I was so sure was that the young Lucas always pronounced my name with a rising intonation. Every time he called me, it was as if he was smiling with the corners of his mouth turned up. However, that devil pronounced the word Lily with a downward intonation. The slightly elongated tone was like a rope dragging me into hell. Seeing me, he quickly stepped forward and tried to hold my hand. Great, you're still here. I was so scared by his sudden action that I lost control and screamed. Alexander pulled me behind him and kicked Lucas in the chest. Lucas's physical condition seemed very poor. Just from that one kick, he lay on the ground for a long time to recover. He staggered to his feet. To my surprise, he asked me in an incredulous tone, Lily, have you cheated on me? Huh? Perhaps Alexander gave me a strong sense of security, or maybe it was because Lucas looked so wretched when he was lying on the ground just now. I walked out from behind Alexander, clenching my fists tightly. General Manager Lucas, hope you're well. My lips were trembling when I said this sentence. I could let the current Lucas go, but what about the Lucas from 5 years later? How should I torture him properly? Hearing my address to him, General Manager Lucas was obviously stunned for a moment. After a while, it seemed that he had accepted that the me in front of him was no longer the lovesick one before. After recognizing the reality, General Manager Lucas hurriedly said, Lily, I know that everything was Mia's doing. I misunderstood you. After you left, Jasper died and the baby couldn't be saved either. You don't know yet that baby was ours. You weren't. I hired a hypnotist to hypnotize you. I did a lot of asshole things back then. I thought I hated you. But after you died, I realized that I actually loved you so much, even more than I had imagined. I was blinded by hatred. I drank heavily every day because only when I was drunk could I see you. Later, I really couldn't bear the world without you, so I sank into the sea with the ashes of you and the baby. I remember you said you liked the sea the most. I didn't expect that I was reborn. This is a chance given by heaven, Lily. Come back to me. Misunderstanding? I patiently listened to his so-called affectionate confession. General Manager Lucas was still the same General Manager Lucas, who was used to weighing the pros and cons. He didn't even use the word wronged, but just casually brushed it off with the word misunderstanding. General Manager Lucas thought that the shiny light in my eyes was because I was touched by his words. He even tried to continue to deceive me. Yes, it's a misunderstanding. Lily, believe me, that he was really rotten to the core. I thought of something and turned my head to ask Alexander with my eyes if he had done something behind the Lucas family's back. Alexander nodded in admission. I looked at General Manager Lucas sarcastically. No wonder the profit-driven General Manager Lucas was willing to humble himself to beg me. General Manager Lucas, hasn't the Lucas family been having a hard time recently? Hearing this, General Manager Lucas's face turned pale and stiff. Before I could say anything else, in just a blink of an eye, his face suddenly became blank again. Where is this, Lily? I didn't mean to disturb you. I don't even know how This was Lucas. Before he could finish speaking, his voice changed again. It became the voice of General Manager Lucas. You useless piece of shit. You not only lost Lily, but also made a mess of the company. Lucas's voice rang out again. It's you? You bastard. I won't allow you to hurt Lily again. Alexander and I looked at each other. We got the answer from each other's eyes. General Manager Lucas was indeed reborn, but his rebirth was not complete. It was like a cicada shedding its shell, with the shell and the cicada stuck together. Neither could be separated from the other, and neither could abandon the other. Both General Manager Lucas and the original Lucas shared the same body. Lucas's left and right hands simultaneously grabbed his own neck. Both souls wanted to put the other to death. It turns out that evil people will eventually get their comeuppance. The way he was now was more satisfying to the body and mind than all the means of revenge. Lucas couldn't accept the vicious self he became 5 years later, and General Manager Lucas couldn't accept the innocent and naive Lucas now either. This was really interesting. To avoid them dirtying the floor of my house, I had Lucas sent back to the Lucas family. I heard that Lucas had been in this situation for some time, but the news had been covered up before. Now that Lucas had been in this situation for some time, the news had been covered up before. Now that Lucas was reported to be going crazy everywhere, General Manager Sebastian, considering the precarious situation of the Lucas family, sent Lucas to the mental hospital in the west of the city. Alexander accompanied me to that hospital to visit Lucas, who was receiving treatment. Ha 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 ha. That was really an even more interesting place. Alexander proposed to me. I liked him, but I couldn't give him the intimacy that lovers usually have. I didn't want to do that kind of thing, and I wouldn't want children in the future either. Not knowing what to do for a moment, I could only be honest with him. It seemed that Alexander had already thought of these things. He said, "There's nothing wrong with a platonic relationship. Lily, as long as it's you, everything is fine." I repeatedly confirmed with him, "But can you accept being childless? Without children, not only will your company have no heir, but there will also be much less fun in the family." Instead, Alexander smiled with relief. "Didn't I give my company to you as my dowry? Doesn't your family still have your brother? Let him have more children to inherit it. Besides, without children, I can have you all to myself, and no one can take you away from me." Alexander hugged me and said with a satisfied look on his face, "Don't worry, Lily. I've been alone for so many years. Being with you, I'm already very content. For the rest of our lives, we'll grow old together." I hugged Alexander back, burying my face in his neck. My whole body was surrounded by the faint fragrance of cedar. My heart was filled with peace. I replied, "Grow old together." Finally, the long night welcomed the dawn. The day broke.